What's up? I'm Tucker Case.
I'm Honest Diana.
And we are Bandit Pimp.
That we are.
First, we're going to topic about women in film. Or is that second we're going to talk about?
Yeah, that'll take a lot more time, so we'll talk about that afterwards. The first thing I wanted to talk about was Inside Xbox.
Oh, I didn't remember about that one.
How dare you? You weren't even there.
I've never been inside of an Xbox.
I have.
I tried. It didn't fit.
Inside Xbox is a monthly live stream, live show, really, that is broadcast from Microsoft Production Studios once a month. It just started its first one this past month. They talked about Sea of Thieves was kind of their main topic for that particular show.
Yes.
The next one is also on the 10th. It's going to be on April 10th. And I don't actually know if that's like a cat. She's eating a dried noodle.
It's not great for sound department. Bring her up here. Get the nugget.
Come here! So now there's a cat in the stream.
Yep.
Anyway, so it was on the 10th of March, and bye, cat. And it's going to be on the 10th of April as well, which is weird because it's like a Tuesday or something like that. But it's a huge, like, giant production live stream. And they have, like, a ton of friggin' execs from Xbox and, like, super famous gamers and stuff like that. And, like I said, this past one was Sea of Thieves was their main topic. So they had some parrots, some real live parrots.
What were the parrots' names?
Oh god, I don't remember.
Oh.
One of them was named Sunny, I think.
Sure.
I don't know. They were all lady parrots.
Lady parrots.
Ain't not no boy parrots.
Nice.
But yeah, they were super cool. And they also talked about Far Cry 5, PUBG, and PixARK. So I don't know if you've heard about PixARK.
I haven't.
I hadn't. I don't really know what it is. I have no authority to talk about it. But they did delve into Far Cry 5 a little bit, which was kind of cool because they interviewed Greg.
Oh yeah, nice.
Yeah. So that was fun. And anyway, the point I'm trying to get to here is that I work on the production side of this. So I'm going to be there. And yeah, it's just a cool kind of new show that I didn't know about until I was hired for it. And it's, like I said, like huge budget production with like a ton of stuff going on. It's like a game show. It's crazy. But it's super cool. So if y'all are interested in gaming, particularly Xbox, and you want to stay up to date on that, it streams live on Facebook. And I think Twitch too. So just hit up like Xbox on Facebook and you'll see it there. Are you interested in Sea of Thieves at all?
I mean, I naturally like pirates, so I'm as interested as the next pirate fan, I suppose.
Yeah.
The only video game I've ever really played that you can play like a pirate on a ship, I guess, is like Assassin's Creed Black Flag. So.
Yeah, and that's like single player.
Yeah, this is a totally different...
Yeah, this Sea of Thieves is like a massive, like, multiplayer online kind of a thing. It's not just, like, every man for himself and you're all fighting each other.
Yeah.
You band up with other players, and you make your own crew, and you each, like, serve a different position on the ship. Like, one of you's the captain, one of you's the deck swabber. I don't know. I don't actually know anything about it. But it's been out for like a year in beta.
Do you think that people in that game, like the really good players, are going to start to like specialize at playing one role?
Most likely.
And people will like they'll track down like the best deck swabber.
Yeah, there'll be like legendary captains and stuff like that.
Oh, definitely that.
That people will want to go ship under. And y'all get to like battle other crews, and then you also get to go like find treasure and stuff, and it's always updating, so there's new things going on in the game, new treasures to be found and stuff like that. So I don't know, it sounds interesting to me. I don't know that I'm gonna buy it when it's brand new, but maybe in like 6 months when it's on sale.
I'm not gonna buy it brand new.
It's also cross compatible with PC.
That's cool.
Yeah. And then Far Cry 5, PUBG, which I haven't played, but I've watched some people stream. It's not really my cup of tea, because I'm terrible at killing people in video games, so I would die.
Yeah.
Real quick. Speaking of which, Far Cry 5 comes out the 27th, and we will be playing that.
Because we don't have to buy it.
Yeah, we get it for free.
Hell yeah.
So we'll be streaming that pretty quickly after it comes out. So yes, Inside Xbox is live once a month, talking about the latest releases and news and whatnot for Xbox. And I'll be behind the scenes playing with parrots. Kind of the longer-winded topic we wanted to touch on today is regarding women in film, and that's a really broad topic, but since it was International Women's Day this past month, it was something we kind of wanted to touch on, and what we decided to do eventually after talking was more of like a series, because there's so much to cover in that particular subject that we'll want to come back and touch on it again. But for this one, we're just going to focus on, like, literally female characters in film. How women are portrayed, written specifically in film. And then perhaps in another podcast, we'll talk about, like, actresses being an actress and how they're treated in film and how that's changing. And then, once again, with crew members.
I mean, not all, obviously, but the majority of films, have been written by men, directed by men, produced by men, all that action. So there's always been a problem with, like, well-developed women characters in film. Obviously, they've definitely been out there, but they're rare, because there's these archetypes that women are often, like, shoved into. Like, the ingenue, like the girl that comes to the big city for the big city dreams kind of thing. There's, like, the seductress, dangerous woman that just uses sex to get whatever she wants. Mm-hmm. There's, like, the corporate woman kind of stereotype, like a rich, powerful woman, and she's always a bitch.
Yeah, there's basically, like, two characters in all of female character Hollywood.
Yeah. It's
like the strong, bitchy woman, or the vulnerable,
yeah,
like, innocent woman.
Yeah, like a vulnerable,
if they have an arc, their arc always involves them becoming one or the other. So, like, if you're a, like, hard-ass, bitchy boss lady, then your arc usually involves you ending up being sweeter and more vulnerable. And if you're the sweet, vulnerable girl coming to the big city or whatever, then your arc usually ends with you being, like, strong, empowered, like, boss lady. That's what men think that women struggle with. Kind of a thing. So they're all, very one-note thing, and it's not that men are, like, stupid or something like that. It's just that being a woman, you are more familiar with the struggles that the average woman goes through. So you can write a more in-depth story about it. Just like being a man, you're more privy to the kind of struggles that a man goes through, mm-hmm. and how they feel about those struggles and how they overcome them. Mm-hmm. Whereas a man, watching a woman and being like, I want to write a movie about being, a strong feminist woman or whatever, mm-hmm. it usually ends up just being really one note and kind of falling flat.
You can't really write what you don't know. Super accurately, unless you spend a lot of time in whatever environment you're trying to emulate.
Basically, we just wanted to talk about how it's changing, because there are more female writers in Hollywood nowadays. And in addition to that, there's a bigger feminism movement going on right now, particularly in Hollywood, especially after the whole, like, Harvey Weinstein scandal, and now with the Me Too movement and the Time's Up movement and whatnot. It's becoming something that these, big budget production companies or whatever have to contend with.
Yeah.
It's a double-edged sword, because they're kind of like, oh, well, we think that this is what people want. Mm-hmm. And so they, like, really latch onto that, and I don't know. It's kind of a weird, confusing time. I think we're still in a shift where maybe in the future we're going to have some really good feminism-driven films with really good female characters.
Mm-hmm.
But right now it's just in that weird kind of crossroads point where Hollywood's just going like, oh crap, we need to write more movies about women.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's like reactionary a lot of the time. And you can just tell when it's going to be that sort of a movie where it's really obviously just like an overcompensation.
Yeah.
Like, for example, remaking Ghostbusters all-female.
Yeah.
That's just silly to me. Because that's not feminism, that's just more ignorance. Say there was a movie about, like, the Night Witches. And the Night Witches were in a division of female Russian pilots. They came in a little later in the war, and they were all-female division. And, you know, a movie featuring that all-female cast, you know, there's a reason. There's females that were in that world, in that story, you know?
Mm-hmm. Primarily females.
Right. Yeah. And it's not like it's just an action film, but with all females, instead of Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger. You know, that doesn't do anything.
Yeah. There are films coming out like Annihilation is one of them, which once again I haven't seen, so I'm not going to pass any like judgment or say my opinion on it or anything like that because I haven't seen it. But it's like an action film that has pretty much all female cast.
Mm-hmm.
And Tomb Raider, the new Tomb Raider.
Yeah.
It's like, once again, I can't really pass judgment on it because I haven't seen it. And I'm probably not going to, but
yeah.
It looks like that would be a prime example of some big budget production company overcompensating and being like, look, we're feminists too. Let's take this tiny, like, 90-pound soaking wet girl with no muscle mass and make her do ridiculous things that there's no possible way she could do.
Yeah.
She does not have the upper body strength for it. Just because, like, look, it's feminism, women are strong too, or whatever.
Right.
Annihilation, I don't know. It looks like it could be decent. It's just, I don't know if there's a reason for them to be an all-female cast or whatnot. Or if it's just the production company pushing feminism.
The point is, if you're gonna have an all-female cast and you're going to try to tackle a complex issue like feminism, you have to do it the right way. Mm-hmm. You know? You can't be a bunch of rich white Hollywood dudes, or rich Hollywood dudes of any race, and sit in a room and just decide what an all-female cast would think about. Maybe you should bring a woman into the mix, you know, or a bunch of women, you know, to have the opinions of your actual subject. I would never write a movie about, like, a Native American reservation or something without going to a Native American reservation and speaking to a Native American, you know? Mm-hmm. But I guarantee you there's been plenty of movies written with female lead characters where a woman wasn't, like, involved in the creative process at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like every single Charlie's Angels kind of movie in the past. Like, those are all, I mean, really obviously had no input from a woman at all whatsoever.
Yeah.
Like, the main struggles that these women are overcoming are, like, losing their hairbrush, or, like, looking for tampons, or finding out how to put on lipstick in a submarine, or whatever. You know, that's what men thought that women dealt with back in the day. And I remember watching Mystery Science Theater episodes, and every time there was a film that had, like, a woman lead or primarily female cast, like, just all the jokes they had were about them finding tampons and stuff like that.
That's true. They definitely
and looking for their purses and things like that. And it wasn't because, like, Mike and the Bots are douchebags or whatever. It's because that's what the movie was.
Oh, no, that's what the women were doing in the movie. Yeah.
So, yeah, and then you've got shows like MASH, which is a really interesting kind of case study on this, because in the first few seasons, Margaret, who is a really prominent character, she's pretty much like the only woman in that show who isn't just like a disembodied nurse.
Yeah, there's lots of nurses that are basically there to just, like, have sex with Hawkeye.
Yeah. Or,
Or
just
make out with Hawkeye or try.
laugh at their jokes or whatever.
Right.
But Margaret Houlihan, or Hot Lips Houlihan as they call her, especially in the first couple of episodes, is just like this really one-note character who's just that, like, you know, bitchy boss lady that we were talking about earlier. And, like, her entire existence revolves around Frank, who's, like, her boyfriend
The
in
most
beginning.
terrible character in the entire show.
Yeah, who's, like, barely a character. And
terrible.
he's married and won't leave his wife for her. And she just doesn't care. She's just, like, anytime he mentions his wife, she just, like, cries, and then he'll be like, oh, pretend I didn't say that, and she'll be like, say what? And just go back to being in love with him for no reason. And she's, like, obviously this very smart and strong and powerful within the army.
Yeah, she's
woman.
she's the same rank as him.
Yeah.
And she's
and her
also...
whole family has been in the military.
Yeah. And for, like, 4 seasons, yeah, like you said, that's basically her entire existence. And even though he proves, like, time and time again that he will leave her out to dry, he will not back her up on things.
And that he's a coward.
Total coward, a total douche.
And here's the thing, though, is that MASH was a spin-off of the movie, obviously, which was a spin-off of the book. But, like, the thing that made that movie so popular is those characters. And obviously it's a movie, so you can't delve into the characters, especially when you have that many characters, as much as you can in a 11-year-long show.
Right.
But that movie, you know, that's basically what Margaret was. And Frank was actually a little more fleshed out in the film, so it made a little more sense.
Okay.
But that's all Margaret was. So when they got, like, the green light to make this show, they just kind of took the movie and just, like, expanded it over a bunch of different episodes. And the characters started getting repetitive, but, you know, the network was like, hey, that's what people like. They went to the movie, and it was a huge hit because of these characters, so keep them like that. And then right around the 3rd season, you notice that this show has gotten bigger than the film, and that it's a really big deal, and they're making tons of money off of it. So it gets to a point where the writers and the entire creative side can just kind of do what they want at that point. Because they're so successful. So they deviate from that initial just expansion of the film. And it takes a little, like another season or two for Frank to leave, which is when Margaret really gets to be her own person. But even just in, like, the first episode of the 4th season, you notice that all of the characters start getting a little bit more fleshed out, and particularly Margaret. And by the end of the series, even just by, like, season 5, but especially by the end of the series, she's just, like, such an interesting character, and such a fantastic character. And she gets so fleshed out, and all of the struggles that she has, are really relevant. Like, you know that they accepted input from that actress, and from any other female who was a part of that production. I'm sure they accepted, you know, input from their wives and whatnot. But the things that she struggles with later on, like, are things that I've struggled with before, that are, like, they're really serious things. It's not just she's upset because she's lonely or something.
Yeah.
Which is also something that they show pretty well, especially later on, too, is what it's like being a woman in the army and just being lonely and not feeling like a woman and not feeling feminine and whatnot. But yeah, she overcomes some pretty serious stuff, and it's really interesting to watch as a woman because you relate to it so much. And it's a really interesting study because it starts out with just that really basic kind of one-note female character and then expanding. But one thing I wanted to mention, too, even with these films that are kind of famous for being, like, feminist films and bringing women to the front and giving them lead roles and being very empowering, like Wonder Woman, for example, is that they fail the test, you know, the test that they'll put movies through that's determines if they're, like, on equal ground or not. That's basically just, how many words a
Yeah.
woman says for,
Okay,
for
I've seen that.
however many words a man says.
Yeah.
And then also, the other part of that test is if the women ever talk about something that isn't a man. I say Wonder Woman because that, like, fails that test dramatically. Like, even though it's supposed to be this huge, empowering feminist story, after the first, like, 15, 20 minutes, she's the only woman in it.
Right. That's true.
Yeah.
And she doesn't talk a whole lot.
No.
No.
It's just a lot of men talking.
She beats up most of those men. But again, that's kind of the compensating the wrong way kind of thing.
Yeah. Like, Diana, like, in the comics and historically is supposed to be very smart and brave.
Yeah.
And I don't think they really showed her smarts all that well.
No.
Yeah, but another show that's a very interesting case study on just women characters and how they're written is Game of Thrones.
Yes, which was written by a man.
Mm-hmm.
All those women characters were written
However, there's a lot of female creative input in the show.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I'm not saying... I'm saying it's a refreshingly good example of a man writing decent, well-rounded women characters.
Yeah, and I think...
Because George Martin did a really good job of that.
And I think one of the main reasons why he was good at it was because I don't think he was trying to determine, like, what struggles a woman would go through. I think he was more trying to determine just what struggles people in general went through during medieval times. And that, kind of evens the playing field when you look at female characters as just people. You look at everyone, it's just, they're all people. They're all going through all these struggles.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, most of the struggles that aren't, like, based on whatever society you're in, and that comes with, like, religion, economy, culture, and all that, are just people struggles, and everybody has them. We all have to worry about shelter, we all have to worry about food, we all have to worry about not getting killed by whatever asshole next door is trying to kill us. And you're right, I think he just has a really good grasp of humans and human behavior, and he just sees them as more equal, and the more you can do that, the more that you can write effective women characters, because you have to realize that they're just people. That is a weird thing that, like, entertainment and pop culture and all these things, they create this mystical idea that women are, like, so much different from men, which they're definitely different in a lot of ways, but again, I'm a firm believer that a lot of that is societal influence.
One of the things about this whole, like, feminism movement and whatnot is, like, de-sexing women, because historically they've always been overly sexed, and, like, for example, in Wonder Woman, once again, all of their outfits and, like, the training garb and armor and everything that they wore, and then even her outfits later on, well, like, they were relatively, like, form-fitting and whatnot, but she never had, like, cleavage or anything like that.
Yeah.
Her skirt was kind of stupidly short, but that was kind of, how the comic
That's
book
also
was.
from the comics, yeah.
But they also never did those, like upskirt shots that they do a lot for women in film. So she was relatively de-sexed in that film. We both have what I think is kind of a unique viewpoint on that. Nudity and sexual clothing and stuff like that isn't necessarily, like, anti-feminist. Nudity can actually be very empowering for a woman. It depends on the woman. Like, I don't typically dress very revealing. It's just kind of not my style.
Yeah.
I work for a living. Physically. So I wear stuff that's comfortable and that I can work in.
Yeah.
But, like, Daenerys specifically has a really interesting arc that happens that's, it's, like, shown through her nudity, which is kind of interesting. And I think it's a pretty powerful way to develop someone's character. Like, what comes to mind is in the very beginning, when Khal Drogo is like tearing her clothes off of her after he
Yeah.
just bought her, and she's sitting there like trying to cover herself up and crying and grabbing her clothes. Like she's very vulnerable at that point.
Yeah.
But then when his funeral pyre burns down and she walks out of the flames unscathed, and she's got a power stance and her dragons, and she's completely naked. That's empowering, and it's not just like senseless nudity.
Right.
It's showing that every inch of her body is unburnt. That's where she gets her name, the Unburnt, which is a really powerful name, and shows that she's, the true dragon.
Yeah.
As opposed to her brother,
who literally got burnt to death. Yeah.
So it's just, nudity can actually be like a really powerful storytelling tool.
Well, and it's interesting because I like how you say her nudity and her her comfortableness with it is kind of her arc. Because she does kind of go through the arc that we talked about earlier, where she goes from being really timid and like covered up, to being fully comfortable, like fully nude in front of like a mercenary captain in her tent, and she's just like steps out of the bathtub and she's like, if you're here to serve me, then kneel, and it's like a full frontal, but it's not a shot that's meant to be like, it's not a shot like, ooh, look at this hot girl.
Yeah.
It's a shot like, that's a powerful woman right there. That she's not afraid of you. She's not afraid to be naked in front of you. She doesn't care if you've seen that or what. She's the one in power, and she knows it.
Exactly.
And you can just see that by the actions and the comfort level.
Yeah, and that's like a good example of women like using their bodies for empowerment, as opposed to something like a Michael Bay movie, where you've got these like way overly dressed up, overly sexed women like contorting their bodies in really painful positions just to look good on camera for the men watching this stupid explosion movie.
Yeah.
As opposed to Game of Thrones, which gets a lot of kind of like thwack for being like having way too much sex and
overly
nudity.
sexualized, yeah.
Like honestly, it's kind of cool as a woman to watch Game of Thrones. Because, like, especially, I know this sounds weird, but a lot of the scenes in, like, the brothels and whatnot, there's, like, all these naked women walking around, and they're all different shapes and sizes.
Yeah.
It's not just, like, a bunch of, like, plastic surgery hot models walking around. There's tall women, short women, flat-chested women, women with saggy boobs and whatnot, hairy women,
older
hairless women. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's kind of nice for me to watch that and be like, oh, okay.
It looks like a real brothel. I think honestly, it's just like those little subtle differences that really separate like good characters from mediocre or bad characters. And it's just like how you use all the devices that you utilize to tell who they are, And there's lots of strong women characters in Game of Thrones. It's full of them. Like Roz, the prostitute from Winterfell.
Yeah,
who rises to King's Landing, being like Littlefinger's right hand.
Yeah, and she's also like respected in that position. She's, by the end of her arc anyway, there's not a whole lot of people who are like looking her up and down and calling her a whore and like tossing quarters at her or whatever.
No.
There are, however, some characters in Game of Thrones who are kind of the opposite end of that spectrum too.
Yeah.
Like I found the nudity scene of that one Sand Snake. What was the one with Braun?
Who's the most beautiful woman in the world? That scene.
Yeah. Was that Whip Snake?
No, that's Knife Snake.
Knife Snake.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that one was really tasteless. Because that one it didn't really serve any purpose. It didn't really develop her character at all. And it was like a slow pan of her body. It wasn't like...
Yes, but that's because Dorne as a whole, they ruined it in the show.
Well, let's not get too far into that.
I'm not, but I'm just saying. Dorne as a whole is kind of the epitome of Game of Thrones doing all those things we talked about that ruin the sexualization in film because they're used in a tasteless fashion.
More specifically about, like, the sand snakes and how, like, I don't know any of their names. I call them, like, whip snake and knife snake and spear snake.
Yeah.
Like, that's all they are. this is why Game of Thrones is a good study on this, because they drop the ball in certain areas, and
you can't do everything perfect.
Yeah, and it becomes really evident, like, how you feel about these characters, and like which ones you respect, and like, like every guy I've ever talked to about that show and about like specifically that episode, like, they don't know what that girl's name was. They don't know what that actress's name was. They don't know anything about her, but they're like, yeah, she was hot, man. Whereas when it comes to Daenerys and, like, Emilia Clarke, people are, like, naming their kids after her. Like,
right.
Every guy in the world knows that actress's name, not just the character's name. And they have, like, respect for her. They're not just like, yeah, man, boobs, or whatever.
Right.
They actually, care about that character.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd watch other things that actress was in and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
And I mean, probably my favorite character in this show is Arya, Yeah. She's awesome. Mm-hmm. She's such a great character. Her arc is fantastic. You see what it's like for a girl to grow up without those, like, societal expectations.
Yeah, especially because she was a boy for a while.
Yeah, exactly. For a good portion of her story arc, she just is a boy, and now she's, like, not a person.
Yeah, and the other thing that they did well with Arya is that, for one thing, obviously, she's not sexed at all.
Right.
But, like, they also managed to have, like, a little, like, romantic subplot with her, too. Mm-hmm. Without ever, like, even making her feminine in the slightest.
Right.
So I think that was really well done, too, because obviously there's women out there who aren't super feminine, who don't have long hair and aren't, soft-spoken and meek and whatever, but they...
That makes them more beautiful to a lot of men.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It just depends on who you are. Not only in stories, but in real life, which is where all stories come from. Mm-hmm. We have seen plenty of examples where if you just chill out about sex, then most of the problems with it go away.
Yeah, and a lot of those problems are, like, the main problems that we as females face. Like, I think that prostitution should be legal because all of the problems that come from prostitution come from the fact that it's happening in this seedy underbelly kind of a thing. If it was legal and these women could have, like, unions, and if their pimp was beating them or whatever, they could go to the police and complain and not have to worry about being thrown in jail because they're a sex worker.
Right, but if you just legalize prostitution, then women wouldn't have to be controlled by, like, a criminal man.
Yeah. And
like a gangster that,
like, they would, it would be a legitimate job. You could have, like an office kind of a place. You could have, like, benefits in which you would have, like, health care and
you could have
birth control and stuff like that, so that, like, STDs would go way down and abortions would go down and all that kind of stuff, just because they're being taken care of.
Yeah. And
historically, sex workers haven't been shamed. In fact, they've been kind of renowned and respected.
In certain cultures, yeah. I mean, even in, like we talked about earlier, Wild West America. Mm-hmm.
And a lot of women at that time, like, made a life for themselves by starting out as sex workers. Mm-hmm. And they could, that was the only way they could make money. And they made money, and they became property owners, and they opened stores and kitchens and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And really made a lot of the towns that before then were just, like, tents and shacks that men just kind of hastily put up while they were, panning for gold or whatever they were doing in that particular area.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't become a town until the women showed up and started making it a town.
Being able to do a profession that is in high demand.
Yeah.
And you can perform well, you should just be able to do that.
Yeah, and then on top of that, when things like brothels became more established, you would have, like, a madame who kind of oversees the whole thing. Make sure that it's safe, make sure that it's clean, make sure that none of her her employees are being taken advantage of or beaten or something.
Mm-hmm.
She, made sure that they had everything they needed. They had a place to sleep. They had food. They had all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it was like a good job to have.
Yeah. The best two cultural examples I can think of when sexualization was less demonized and it was positive for society is like the Native American societies, like particularly the Iroquois. They were like run by a matriarchy, and they're one of the only confederacies in history that ever worked out, because people didn't own each other like property. Like, your wife, if she wanted to not be your wife anymore, she just wasn't your wife anymore, and she would be free to go and
she could,
find another...
publicly divorce you.
Yeah.
You can do much about it. Like, in more recent times, even just in, like, the late 1800s, early 1900s, legally speaking, a woman couldn't divorce her husband for adultery.
Mm-hmm.
But a man could divorce his wife for adultery.
Right. Yeah. And then the second culture that was historically very, very good about this was the Japanese, I mean, that's a classic culture, the geisha culture. It's pretty well known because it was, culturally around the world, honestly, it's kind of a phenomena. It shouldn't be, but it is. Because that's where women were put in complete control of their bodies, and sex working was completely legal.
Yeah, not only that, but it was, like, highly respected, and
yeah.
it also, like, trickled down, because you'd have this geisha who made all this money, and she had this whole house that supported her. There was, like, a madame, a mother, or whatever you want to call it, that lived there, that kind of, like, managed her and took care of her, and then someone who took care of the house, and then, servants, and she had a doctor, and all that, a cook, and all that kind of stuff, and then you would have a geisha apprentice who would come on, and she would train her, and then that geisha could retire and live a very nice, comfortable life for the rest of her life, or become the mother of the house, or whatever she wants to do.
Yeah.
Well, that new geisha took her place, and that would keep going on, and that the geisha was, like, so well cared for, and just so supported and everything like that, and in return, she financially took care of the entire house, and it was just such a wonderful system that worked so well, and, they were highly respected. It wasn't like anyone would ever call a geisha a hoe or something like that.
No, because if they did, she probably has some samurai friends who would kill you for that.
Or political somebody.
Well, yeah,
she could basically just destroy you.
Wouldn't be good. Yeah, I'm sure there's one of her regulars that wouldn't take too kindly to disrespecting her. And back to the film thing. One show that did a really good job of using that exact culture as motivation was Firefly. Anara, she's like on the ship they call her their ambassador because she goes to planets and gets them out of scrapes in a political way, like, all the time. She's the only high-ranking member of society that's on their crew. Even the captain is, like, completely respects her, would never, like, invade her privacy or whatever.
Yeah.
Unless he absolutely, has to. She chooses anybody she wants to accept as a client. She has a complex, like, screening process. And again, she's protected by what, it's called the guild in the show, but like you said, a union. If people band together, they can protect each other from bigger, powerful forces, and that's really the only way. Whereas right now, there's monstrous and powerful forces out there that are doing everything from, like, kidnapping young women and forcing them into this from the time they're not even teenagers yet, to women trying to be out there making it on their own, doing this highly illegal thing, and that leads to you have to deal with really shady people.
Yeah, and you can't go to the doctor and tell them what you're doing in order to get the right kind of care that you need, and the right kind of birth control, and the right kind of STD testing and whatnot.
You can't get protection from law enforcement.
And you can't, like, use this as a way to prove your income or something like that, so you have, like, a nice home that you can be in that's safe, that's clean, so a lot of them just, like, stay at random people's houses, and it's just, you know, they get diseases, they get, like, it would be so much better if they could just
be open about it.
Yeah, be what they are. But yeah, I guess where we're trying to go with this is that there's this huge kind of uprising of feminism in Hollywood, particularly, like, in the way characters are written and whatnot. And I just feel that it can go, like, too far one way or the other, especially if it's male writers and they're, like, really terrified of over-sexualizing a woman. I don't think that that's something you should be afraid of doing. I think you should be afraid of needlessly over-sexualizing a woman. But feel free to have, like, a sexualized woman in your story, because they exist. That's how they are. But don't make all of your women be the exact same way.
Well, no. And
don't make them all be, like, ridiculous badasses who can magically, like, lift 500 pounds.
Yeah.
When they're, like, tiny, skinny, you know, vulnerable. You can't have both.
No, I mean, do badass women exist? Yes. Again, I could go back to Game of Thrones, but, like, Brienne of Tarth, that's a badass woman. She's, like, 6'5".
Yeah.
And all she's done her whole life is train in combat.
And everything that she actually does is really realistic. Like, you can see her doing that. She's not, like, a hot, like, 5'7", tiny little 115-pound girl.
She's not Daenerys.
Like, yeah, fucking up Jaime Lannister kind of a thing.
Or like the Hound. She's, like, bigger, she's taller than the Hound. So it's all real, like you say, realistic. You could believe she's a knight, you know?
Yeah.
Again, believable versus totally just not believable and obviously overcompensating.
Yeah, and
is the problem. As
usual, you know, the ones that are doing this right are the indie filmmakers, the ones like the people who made Lady Bird. You know, it's the indie filmmakers who are doing it right, and it's Hollywood who's, like, saying, oh, we need to jump on this Me Too bandwagon and then way overcompensating and ruining it.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm really trying to go for with this whole subject is that, you know, female characters in film are just as complex as male characters. They're not one way or another. You don't need to overcompensate and freak out if you feel like your woman's too sexy or has too many nude scenes, because people are going to get angry at you for it. And feminists are going to get angry at you for it. If there's a reason for her to be nude, have her be nude. If there's no reason, well, then there's your problem.
Yeah,
just ask yourself if there's a reason for whatever you're doing.
And simultaneously, women are just as simple as men. They're humans and they're motivated by the same shit. We gotta eat, we gotta have shelter, and whatever makes us happy, we gotta have
puppies.
Doses of that. Yeah. Puppies. I guess movies make me happy. Sometimes video games.
Kitties.
Definitely puppies.
Yep.
We're going to talk about it some more in different aspects.
Yeah, we'll have a couple of different, like, episodes where we talk about, because this was just female fictional characters, and then we'll obviously talk about what it's like being an actress and what it's like being crew in film, which I'll have a lot to say on.
Yeah. I'll have stuff to say too. Just having worked with lots of women.
I'll basically just, like, have a bunch of stories.
Yeah.
It'll just be story time.
Story
time podcast.
Yep. Sweet. Well, thank you for watching. I'm Tucker Case.
I'm Anna Schiera.
And we are Bandit Pimp.
Farewell, Internet.
Bye, Internet.
See you next time.